not have all the comments. As and when I speak, I'll put them or whatever, right? So you were required to create a patient class, and it said that it was children under the age of 10. That was only given to you so that you knew why the weight was being between 1 and 80 pounds, right? Just to give you an idea. So a patient, if you kind of think of a patient as a child going to a pediatric clinic, you'll say, oh, what do I need to know about the patient? You need to know the name, maybe the age, right? Because age is another important factor, another important attribute of it, maybe like address from where he comes or she comes, and so on. There could be many attributes. What I kind of stuck to because of time limitations and what I wanted to check, I said every patient only has 2 attributes: the name of the patient, which was a string, and a list which was keeping the weights of the patient. That's what I stuck to. There could be many things else, as I said. You could have so many more instance variables. But the idea was to at least see, could you work with a normal data string, and could you work with an array list? So my idea was that you would use an array list, and most of you did, but I saw a couple here and there using list, the generic list, which is fine. As long as it is a list, it really doesn't matter to me. The array list is the most easiest to use because it already has methods that you can use quickly, like clear and add and get and so on, so you don't have to bother about it, right? So the first requirement was the class definition. It's still kind of not where it should be, but that's okay. I mean, in due time, hopefully you will get it because you can't escape it. So all I've said is each patient has a name and recorded weights on different visits. So visits and weights were interrelated. Every visit had a weight. So if you wanted to know how many times the patient came to the clinic, all you had to do is take the size of your list, because as many weights that were recorded in your list was number of visits that the patient had made. So you don't have to think of another variable. Oh, she's asking for number of visits. Do I need another variable? No. You can give me the size of the list, and that tells you how many visits were made. So if I'm not asking, there is a reason. So you have to think. So if you added extra variables, instance variables, then you had to do so much extra, which really didn't work out, right? But anyway, so I mean, when I'm asking something, I'm hoping that you'll follow it and you'll see a reason of why it is being asked. So all I said here was each patient has a name and recorded weights. It defines the methods to return the name, the weights, and the average weight of the patient, and add the weight for this patient. The other students did a student class, so that's why it's that student. So you can change that in your file. So here are my instance variables, right? As I said, there could be many more, and logically there will be, because a patient has much more information than only a name and weights, but I left it out. So what are instance variables? Those are those characteristics or fields which are related to an entity of that class. So think about it. Like, all you have to do is think, oh, patient, what information about a patient does a clinic keep? They keep their name, they keep their age, maybe, maybe the day they join the clinic, who knows? Like, I don't know what else, but these are the minimum, right? The sex, gender, female or male, right? What is it? So things like that are kept. I went with saying, okay, I need a name. And I said, also, a list is being maintained about the weights. And what did I say? And I kind of helped quite a few of you with this. I just not help. I did give hints, but what do we need? We just need a list. Why a list? Because it's not one weight I'm talking about. It could be any number of weights. And since it is any number, I'm not using an array. I'm not saying every patient makes 10 visits. There is where you would use an array, where you know that it is fixed. Here we didn't know. Maybe a patient never even came to the clinic. So it will be 0. So since array list is a dynamic data storage structure, it can grow and shrink as you go on. And I was clearing it. Why? Maybe for, I don't know, maybe he's left the clinic or age changes. I'm not keeping his record for the first 5 years, whatever it is. I can clear my list. So since an array list can change in size, this is the best and easiest list to be used in Java. As I said, there are more. You have many more collections. You have a hash map. You have a tree map. They have different features, right? So here it's like an array. You can think of it as an array of any size. That's what it is. So therefore, it is called array list, right? And it was the first one that was introduced in the collection. The second thing that you have to remember about the array list is that an array list is a collection of objects. So you can only collect objects. You cannot collect data types like int, float, double. You can do that. You can collect strings because strings are objects, but the basic data types, you cannot collect them. So how do you get around it? All you have to do is when you create your array list, Every data type in Java has a corresponding class in Java. Int has an integer, float has a float with a capital F, double has a class called double with a capital D. Every basic data type has a corresponding class in Java. So use that, right? And the conversion between int and integer will automatically be done by Java. It will automatically be done. It wasn't when Java started. We had to do it ourselves. Methods were available where we converted them from int to an integer or vice versa. You don't even have to bother now. You just do it, right? You just assume they are the same, but they're not entirely the same because an int is a value. It's put in a value box, whereas an integer, you put the address where you're putting the value into the box. But for us, since Java has already taken care of it, we don't have to bother about conversions. We can work with integers. So here is where you have to be careful that an array list is a collection of objects only. And that was mentioned in the exam in case you're trying int and it didn't work. And some of you were confused, so I kind of helped students going from int to an integer. That's all you have to keep in mind about an array list, right? It's a collection of objects. So that's all you need. You need a list in which you can save weights. What is the type of weights? Integer. So what is it a collection of? Integer objects. Okay. And Java, the only place where Java is non-object oriented is in that basic data types. Everything else is a class in an object in Java. Just those basic data types. Why did they even do it? I don't know. Maybe trying to keep with other languages, right? But that's the only place where you will find Java to be non-object oriented. I created two constants. I had asked this of you too. I said, please use named constants in your code because that's how we want to go. We don't want to see any magic numbers in code at all. 180 don't make any sense, but as soon as I call it minimum weight and maximum weight, it starts to make sense, right? So I wanted you to use named constants throughout your code. With named constants, it's always a good idea to make them static. That is, there is only one copy of the constants that all objects can use. Why? Because it's a constant. It cannot be changed. So why would you not make it a class constant? Unless you need some constant only in a method or something only in a class, you would keep it. Otherwise, you would make it a class constant. So final means it's a constant. Static means it's a class constant. There is only one copy of this constant that all objects of the class will use. And you use this constant. If you wanted to use it outside the class, you would use it patient dot minimum weight, right? That's what static stands for. As long as I saw a final, even if I didn't see a static, I kind of said, okay, they at least know what they're doing. But don't make them local to the method where they're needed. Doesn't make sense, right? Okay, what does the constructor do? Always keep in mind, a constructor initializes the instance variables. I've repeated this so many times. I repeat it again. The use of a constructor is to construct an object. An object is constructed when it has values defined for its instance variables. So the patient name has a name. The array list, the list of weights, either has a list of weights. You can give it. This is an easy way. I didn't even expect you to pass it as a parameter. All I said was just initialize it. So this is an empty array list. So when a patient joins a clinic, the name is passed to this constructor. It has to be. Otherwise, how will you assign it to the instance variable? Remember, the way that a method takes input is not through asking the user. It is through parameters. Parameters are your way of giving input to a method, and return is the way of giving output out of the method, right? That's how it works. So anytime you say, oh, we want to give a value to the patient name, it has to come in as a parameter. You could, as I said, a couple of students did it, and if they did, I looked at their viewpoint and I said, okay, that's how they want to do it. But the easiest way would be when a patient comes in, there are no weights recorded. So what is your array list? An empty array list, right? But this is very important. If you don't do this, if you forget this, then there is no weights list at all. It's an object. Its value is null. So if it is null, how will you work with it? So you have to create the object. How do you create an object? You call the constructor. I'm calling the constructor here. Please notice I'm calling the constructor. I say new, and I call the array list constructor. So all you're doing is you're creating a list, an empty list by default. There's nothing in it, but the object exists. So it's like saying, if I don't have a box, can I keep something in the box? No. That's why you create an array list, right? So I've created an object by that name. So that's all I was expecting in the constructor. But this definitely, if you are missing this, then what are you going to assign to your instance variable, right? So So think about it. When you come and join the college and you're a student, don't you provide this information? You provide your name, you provide your age and whatever. And what does the person at the registrar's office do? It, he or she takes it from you and records it somewhere. That's exactly what constructor is doing. Keep that in mind. You can never go wrong. It is that special method that creates an object. And creates means, if you want to, logically, you would like to give some values to the instance variables. Would you like to leave the name null? No. So if you're not passing a parameter, what will you do? You can't do nothing with it. The second thing, I think I saw it only in one exam out of 60. You don't need to write a set method at all. I said once the patient name is given, you don't need to change it. I don't need a set method. So you can assign the value of patient name directly to your instance variables right in the constructor. I don't need to do it again ever. I said patient name never changes. You can't change it. For whatever reason, I said you can't change it. All of you called a set method in which you did this job, which is okay, I let it go. But at least if you are writing a set method, it should be private. It can be public. If you make it public, that means from the outside world, anybody can change the name of the patient, which is not what was asked. I let it go because I don't think I saw any private set method. Could be one, I could be wrong, but I definitely saw this in one. So all of you called a set method, which was not even required. Did I ask for it? No. It was not even in my instructions. So maybe that would have made you think she didn't ask it. Why? And you could have thought, but anyway, that's okay. So you call a set method in which you set the name. But if you have to write a set method for whatever reason, make it private. If you make it public, that means the name can be changed. Public means this method can be invoked from outside the class. What we don't want, I don't want it. But anyway, so that's another thing. So this is all I was expecting. And definitely create an empty list. So that was the job of the constructor. So please notice there is one parameter. So all I require from you for each method is comments. And the constructor ones are the most easiest actually. And NetBeans helps you. It fills in the param for you. All you have to do is fill it in. You can't leave it here. This is not you doing it. So it will give the name you gave here. It will fill it up here and it's fine. You use parameter names in at param. You have to, otherwise how will I know which one are you talking about? And what does it do? To set the patient's name. That's it. That's all I want. There's not much to say in the description of a constructor, though you could say this method constructs a patient object, gives it a name. We can't say it. I could go a little further, but I'm not even asking so much of you. But you could do this. You could say gives a name and creates a list to save the weights of the patient. That's all that's required. At param, you just have to fill in. And if there is an at return, you have to fill it in. NetBeans does that for you. You don't even have to do it. It just does it. You just have to fill it in. And that's done. Now the get methods were almost correct for everybody because it's the easiest ones to write. Do they need to be called get? No, it's just a convention. The get kind of says, oh, you're trying to get something. Why do you have these get methods? Because your data is private. The instance variables are private. Do you always need a get? No. I may say, I don't want to show the patient's name to anybody. It's not available. You won't have a get method. So it's not that get and sets will always be present and you will just just do them. Think about it. Is it required or not? So these are the easiest methods to comment. So all you have to say is this method returns the name, like normal English. If you have spelling problems, if you have grammatical problems, please write it first in Word or wherever and then copy it here. Use whatever you like. Don't make spelling errors and grammatical errors here. Notice at return doesn't even tell you the name of the variable. Why? Because nobody can see it. It's private. So why should I say the name of my variable, patient name? All I say is just simple. And these are the easiest to write. All you do is you kind of copy it here. There, done. Right? Job is done. So that's what it does. What does the other one do? If you start it, you don't even have to NetBeans helps you to put the at return. What does this method do? It returns the list of weights, or you can say recorded weights, whatever you like. You can use list. List is a normal English word, but don't use array list because array list becomes technical. And there are no technical comments in Java document. It's just our general comments. The list of recorded weights for the patient. And then all you do is you pick it from here and put it in your return. How difficult can that be? Hardly. And returns are so easy to write. And now here again, if you knew that what you were returning, you can return an array list. Nothing stops you. I don't know if you find this strange, but a method can return a collection. All you have to do is when you grasp it on the other end in your main, you have to have an array list in which you can assign it. So whenever a method returns a value, you have to put it in a box which is of the same type. That's all you have to do. Okay, and then we have get number of visits. So now the get number of visits was basically returning the number of visits the patient had made. I don't know why you guys are so against comments. I have no clue. In the long run, you will learn on your own good time. Again, it has put the return for you. All you have to do is pick it up, and I mean, you only have to write it once. Now think about it. The number of visits says how many times did you come to the clinic, and this information is recorded in your array list, because every time the patient comes in, the weight is recorded. So as you keep adding to the array list, it tells you how many visits were made. So all you have to return is the size of the array list. That's it. So don't in the comment says this method returns the size of the list. It doesn't make sense. I'm not asking you what you are doing in it. I'm saying what does the method do? So don't say it returns the size of the list. Does it tell me that it returns the number of visits? No. So all you say is returns the number of visits. But in the code, definitely, this is how you do it. One line. There was hardly any method that needed more than 5 minutes. Hardly. Like they're all simple methods. But anyway, maybe this will help you to kind of go further, which is what I'm expecting. But that's all you needed. Size method is already available. Almost. What you write here is almost what you write in returns, at least in the get methods. Right? In the other methods, it will be a little different, but otherwise it will almost be the same. So it returns the number of minutes. So you don't even have to think about it. If you write your description properly, copy and paste. Okay? It's always almost like that. So that's all you had to do in the number of visits. Find the size of the list. I don't need any instance variable. I saw number of visits being set and get and never being maintained. So the answer is wrong, right? If you have not, you've set it to 0 and you never increment it and you're returning it, you will always get a 0 back. Else every time you add a weight, maintain it, increase it by 1. But that's more work. But even if you did it and you did it right, you added a new instance variable that I hadn't asked for, you manipulated it, you kept account of how many visits were made by counting them yourself, I let it go. But why? You don't need to do extra work. The solution is right there. The array list size tells you how many visits were made. So that's done. The next one says add a patient weight. So this add patient weight adds a weight to the list of weights. So if it adds a weight, it needs a weight. That becomes your parameter, that becomes your input. So if I say add your mark to the list, you'll say, okay, you need the mark. So what is my mark? So it needs a parameter. It just needs one parameter. Now you could go integer here if you like, or you can go int here. Really doesn't matter. As I said, Java will take care of conversions automatically. You're trying to save an int in an array list of integer, it will do the conversion. You take out something from the array list, which is an integer, and put it into an int box, it will do the conversion for you. It doesn't matter to it. So either one will work and they're fine. And we don't have to even bother about it. I'm keeping it a capital integer because that's what I used everywhere. Right? So I'm just keeping it what I declared. Now I asked that you throw an exception. This method throws an exception if the weight is invalid. And there is a reason for throwing an exception. Please don't try to put your brains to it. Let me throw an illegal argument exception. Let me throw an arithmetic exception. No, I don't want you to, because I want to see that throws in your signatures. If you throw an illegal argument exception, you don't have to add that to the signature. So there is a reason why I'm asking it. I'm saying, can you add throws clause to your signatures? If I've asked something, there is a reason for it. So if you changed your If you change it for whatever reason, you can't figure it out or whatever reason, you're going to lose marks somewhere. And I never even thought students would change it, but they did. And in my rubric, there was no place where I could dock off marks for it, because I never thought you would change. When I'm saying throw an exception, you throw an exception. Why should you throw your own exceptions? Like my exception, somebody is throwing my exceptions, illegal argument, arithmetic exception. Why? I said throw an exception, you just throw an exception. That's all I'm asking. I'm asking minimum and you're making it complicated. Okay, so I wanted to see this. If you throw an exception, exception is the highest class in the exception hierarchy. It has to be either dealt with, that is in a try-catch block, you must handle it, or the method must throw it. And classes will never handle anything. Classes say, I asked for a weight, the weight was invalid here, I won't do your job. It's designed by contract. The handling is done in the application that is using the class. So the application that uses this class will have to handle it in a try-catch block. I'll show you how to do that, though that was not asked of you, how to handle it. But a class never handles it. A class will just say, oh, you gave me a wrong value here. Here is your answer. So a throw is like an abnormal return from a method. It just stops working at that particular state. So what did I say? I said if the patient weight was less than 1 or greater than 80, because the valid values were 1 and 80. I said anything between 1 and 80 is valid. 1 pound is the minimum and 80 pounds is the maximum. And or not an and, right? How can something be less than 1 and greater than 80? When you write something, think about it. I'm asking the weight is less than 1 and it is greater than 80. Can it ever happen? It doesn't make sense. So always look at your conditions. So many students made that mistakes. Ors and ands were completely messed up. So I'm checking this first. You could have done the opposite. I just do my exception throwing first, because I say, why even bother like writing an else and all that? So what did I say? I said if the weight was less than 1 or greater than 80, and again, named constant doesn't mean you declare them and then you don't use them. That's not the use of named constants. Named constant means you declare them and you use them in your code. Even in your messages, again, that was very clear in the exam. Please use them everywhere, including your error messages. Otherwise, what do I say? If this is invalid, throw a new exception object. So you're basically saying create an exception object, pass this message to that exception object. The exception class does have a constructor that takes a string. Pass it and create this object and throw it back to whoever is calling this method. We don't know who will call it. Whoever is calling this method, just throw it back. So an exception object gets created and it is returned to the calling class method. We don't know where it is being called. But our job is, I don't know how it will be used. Think about it. The person who wrote the string class in Java API, did he know how many and who will use me? No. So all you're concerned is with writing your own class. Okay. Else. Now else is not necessary because, as I said, a throw is like an abnormal return. Right? Else, what do? You just add it to your list. The add method is already available. You don't even have to do anything at all. And you've seen almost all these methods in the card game. I used size, I used add. So like all you had to do was think about clear maybe, if you had to, right? It is right in the array list. Done. Add patient weight is done. An if and a statement. That's all, nothing else. The next was calculate the average. So again, is there a param and a return here? No, there's no param. I'll try to put something which has a param and a return. So if it doesn't have a param and a return, but it has a throws. So you will notice what happens when I try to put Java doc comments. It will automatically add a throws clause. So that means a throws is needed. You don't even have to bother, oh, what do I need in my Java doc comments? When you start typing it in, it will automatically do it. So what does it do? It says this method adds a weight or adds the weight of the patient. That's what it does. That's its job. What is its param? The patient weight. Remember, param will always give you this name of the parameter because Java doc comments shows you this method. It shows you. It's right there. You can see it. So you'll say, oh, that's patient weight that they're talking about. So this is the new weight to be added. So list is not a bad word to use. It's normal list. What does it throw? An exception. When does it throw an exception? It throws an exception if the weight is not valid. Right? That's when it throws. And you can always say when is the weight is not valid. Or you can say Or you can add, you can say weight must lie between whatever. Now here I can't use that constants from my comments. I have to use those numbers 1 and 80. So sometimes it's not even written. So what does it say? This method adds a weight value to the list of recorded weights. Patient weight, the weight to be added to the list. Right? An exception if the weight is not valid. Done. Job done. Less than a minute to put a comment. Okay, so this method is done. Let's look at the next one. Now here, there are quite a few mistakes here, but I don't know why, but anyway. So this method calculates the average of weights, or average weight, you can say. Right, that's what it does. What does it return? The average weight of the patient. Right, and what does it throw? An exception. You'll say, when does it throw an exception? Remember, I said if there are no recorded weights, whose average are you calculating? Right, so when does it throw an exception? If there are no recorded weights. Or in other words, the patient has not visited the clinic maybe. But I don't say that because we are clearing the weights also. So I'm just saying if there are no recorded weights for the patient. Or the list is empty, right? Okay, so how do I do that now? The first thing, again, why is it throwing an exception? Because I said if the list is empty, how will you calculate the average of something that is empty? Because in average, you divide by the size of the list. If the size is 0, it will throw an exception. So I said, you do it yourself. The common mistake that I saw was using an int here. It is returning a float and using ints to do your calculations will always give you a wrong answer. Why? I'm adding integers. So 5 plus 7 plus 15 plus whatever. The sum is an integer. You're dividing an integer by an integer, which is the size. An integer by an integer always gives an integer. 3 divided by 2 is a 1, not a 1.5. Putting that 1 into a floating number and saying, oh, return this 1 as a float will just make it 1.0. It won't make it 1.5. So your calculations have to be done with the right type of variables, the right kind. You could have used a float here. You could have used a double here. Really doesn't matter what you wanted to use. I kind of stuck with float. I mean, I said it was just weights less than 80. Why do I need a double? Right? And precision is not a big deal anyway. It's not monetary value, so I went with the float. But if you used a double, it was fine. But don't use the float class because it's just a normal variable I'm doing. So again, avoid using local variables if you can. Now you don't need a sum and an average. Use the same variable average, keep adding into it, and once you're done, divide it and return it. Right? If you need one variable, use one. If you need two, the more you use, the more work you have to kind of do. Right? But for some students I have written, if you're going to use the size method 10 times in your code, then at least put it in a local variable and use it. What have I done here? You could have used size here. I went with is empty because there is an is empty method in the array list. Is the list empty? You could have done it the other way, and many of you did it. So you said if the size of my list was greater than 0. So you could do it this way. It wasn't wrong. There's nothing wrong in it, but there's an easy one, true and false. So why would I do this? So you can do this. You can say, is the size greater than 0? If it is, less than 0, this is throwing an exception. If it is less than or equal to 0, then throw an exception. So you could do this, and it is right. There's nothing wrong in it. I just went with this empty, just because it seems more descriptive. Right? Is the list empty? That's all you have to check. Is the list empty? So you're saying, is the list empty? If it is, throw an exception. The patient has not made any visits to the clinic. Or I could have said this, the patient does not have any recorded weights, because maybe not made any visits to the clinic is not right because we are clearing it also. So whatever message, any good, complete, grammatically correct message will do. I don't want to see the size of the list is empty. It's making no sense at all. The size of the list is empty is not making sense to a common user. These messages are going to a user. Keep in mind, these messages are going to a common user. And the size of the list is empty is not making any sense at all. So if that is the case, throw it. Else, what do? I pick up one. Now you can use a for loop here, and a few of you did, but notice the difference. Notice the difference yourself. You start from 0, You go on till less the size of the list. I'm again calling size. So if you are going to call size 3 times in a method, then put it in a local variable. Call it once and put it in a local variable. You could use this loop if you wanted. Start from 0, go on till size -1, and every time increment time. More work. Why will I bother? I'll use a for each loop. There is a for each loop that allows me, I don't have to do anything at all. It will start from the beginning, go till the end, increment it on its own every time. Why will I use a for loop? In a for loop, I have to declare a variable. I have to know where to start. I have to know where to end. I have to increment it myself. Too much work. So for each loop was provided to you for a reason. Use it. What does the for each loop do? It picks up one element at a time, whatever it is, whether it's an integer, whether it's whatever it is. It picks up one element at a time, starting from position 0 in the array list, and passes on to this variable on the left-hand side. Again, I could have used a small int and it would have worked. I just kept capital integer everywhere to be consistent. So what does it do? Pick up the first one, put it in mark, add it to your average. Pick up the second one, add it to the average. And therefore I declared this variable, and notice I initialized it to 0. If I do not initialize it, I'm going to get an error here. It says variable average might not have been initialized because you're using it. You're saying the new value of average is the old value of average plus mark. There is no old value. So you have to initialize it. So initialization is necessary. So if you don't initialize it, then you are going to get a syntax error. So, and it tells you what the problem is. So I use the same variable. I said, why create a sum and then do sum? I just created one variable. Keep adding it. But of course, I would recommend that if you are going to use this a number of times, if you're going to use this method a number of times, and see, if you were using this, you've used it once here. If you were using the for loop, you've used it twice, and you've used it the third time here. If you're going to do this, then you may put it in a local variable. It's just easy because method calls are expensive. You're calling it once, calling it again, calling it again. So it's taking more time. So this is, in that case, I'll say, okay, use a local variable. So I sometimes say you've used it 3 times in your code of 4 lines. Why don't you put it in a local variable? So you could if you wanted to. I didn't feel the need at all because I didn't even use it. I only used it once. So what do? I add it, and at the end I return it. Job done. I don't need local variables at all. What will I do with these local variables? You can do your calculation in your return statement. So now see, average is a float. A float divided by an int. This is definitely an int. A float divided by an int is a float. Mixed expressions are allowed. But an int by an int is an int. So your method may be completely right, but if this type is wrong, your answer is wrong. So definitely that means you're getting wrong answers out of it. So you have to be careful. And I said it can be a real value. I even mentioned that in my exam because I'm saying maybe they're not thinking right away. You know what I mean? Like I'm just trying to tell you everything. Sometimes I don't even think you read what I give you. Anyway, that's up to you. You can't do much about it, right? So that's your average method. Add up everything, sum it up, divide by the size, and give it away. And only do this if it is valid. So if it is empty, nothing has to be done. Get out of the method. Right? So here I just change it. Instead of saying not made any, I'll say has no recorded weights. Or no recorded weights, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter as long as it is correct, grammatically correct. Right? Because we have a clear. So that's what it does. That's all it does. So the common mistake I saw was this one, making this an int. And the answer will be wrong. And you will not be able to figure it out because you're not writing a test or run anything. You didn't have time to, though you could. Within 3 hours, you could have written this class and written a tester yourself. Or do it in BlueJ. I've shown you how to do it in BlueJ. That takes 5 minutes. How will you know that everything is working? And I'll show you right again. I'll again show it to you in BlueJ. BlueJ is a simple download that doesn't even take 5 minutes. And then all you do is test it. Then you don't even have to write your tester yourself. But at some point of time, you have to learn to write testers. You can do beyond it. So this method clears the list of weights or recorded list of weights. And again, not much to be done at all. Your weights are in this list. I want to clear all the weights, I use the clear method. There is a remove all method also, but that works a little differently. One, the remove all method returns a Boolean value. I don't need to return it. Like, I'm not saying return anything. If I had said, okay, return a Boolean value, then I would have used remove all, because I just call it and it returns a true or false and I return it further. But I didn't say it returns anything. I just said clear the list. But there is a remove all method and a couple of students use it. There's nothing wrong in it. It's, again, unnecessary. I don't need anything to be returned. And two, it also requires a parameter. So you call it with patient weights dot remove all, and then again the parameter you again give the name of the collection you're trying to clear. So this is much easier. Right? So a clear method is available. All it does, it empties the list. It doesn't destroy the box. Keep in mind, I'm not destroying it. I'm not saying, oh, it goes back to null. The object still exists. So you can think of it as a sheet of paper still exists. All I've done is I've erased everything from it. So I said, just clear the list, remove all the weights. So if you you do something like this, which is not even like, doesn't make sense, but if you do something like this, it's entirely incorrect. This is incorrect. What are you doing? You're actually destroying the piece of paper. You're actually destroying the box. If it is destroyed, you can't again put anything into it. So that is incorrect. Equal to null is incorrect. Equal to null says this object does not exist. Whereas clear says the object exists, but there is nothing inside the object. And that's what I want from you. So this is definitely entirely incorrect. So, I mean, that's 0. So that's all you had to do. Then it's cleared. The last one said, please write a method. I didn't call it toString for a reason. I'll tell you why didn't I call it toString. Because this method was throwing an exception. Why is it throwing an exception? Because it was calling the calculate average method. It was calling the calculate. So if a method calls another method and that method is throwing an exception, then there are two options. Either you handle it. The method handles it in a try-catch block. I'll again do the try-catch very quickly with you because that's not what I want to do today. I want to write automated testing. I'll do it quickly with you. Or it throws it further. And again, as I said, a class never handles anything. It says, oh, I don't care, here it is. So if I said write the toString method, it is a toString method. That's all it is. But if I say write a toString method, then it's not the overridden method because the toString method does not throw an exception. I can't do it. So if I try to do toString here, so what am I saying? I'm basically saying, oh, I'm overriding the toString method of the object class. But if you bring your mouse over it, it will tell you toString in patient cannot override the toString in object because the original method does not throw an exception. It does not. And just calling it patient information confused you. What's so confusing about it? I just gave it a name, a different name. And that was the reason I didn't call it toString, because then I can't add throws exception to it. You'll say, oh, don't do it then. If I don't add that, see, I'll have another problem. What will be the problem? Because I'm calling calculate average, it will tell me unreported exception must be caught means handled, or thrown. So either you put a try-catch block there if you want to. I wasn't expecting you to. Either put a try-catch block or do what I told you to do. This is what I asked. I said, just call it patient information. So it has its own signatures. Now you can throw an exception, right? And what did I want you to return? A string. So you can again create a local string variable and do it, but otherwise just take a string, format it right here. Patient, show the name, has an average weight of %d stands for integer. And I'm calling the two get methods. I would like you to use get methods in your toString methods. It's like a toString method. Just make it a practice. I don't use it anywhere else, but in toString, it's very common that you call the get method. And what did I do with the average? I called the method and I gave it to math.round to round off the value. And this was again mentioned in your exam. I said common mathematical methods can be found in the math class. What else hint can I give you? Go to the math class, look for a method that rounds it, use it here. Students are writing their own round methods. You're wasting your time, and that's why maybe you get confused. So the math class is available. Common methods that you need seal and round and truncate. There's so many methods. Go and look for something that rounds. And if you don't know what round is, ask. What does round do? And I had given you an example of what does round do. I had given you two examples. This is what will happen if Blake has these weights. This is what will happen if Chloe has these weights. Both examples were showing you the round or use of round. Done, finished. I'm done. It didn't even take us not even an hour to do it. It doesn't. You just have to think as you go on. Think logically. Right? So again, all I can do is I can try. But the onus still lies on you guys. It still lies on you. So this method returns the patient information. And what does it return? The name and the average weight. That's what it returns. So you can just say, you can copy from here. You can make it here. And then an exception you will throw. When does it throw an exception? Oh, if the patient has no recorded weights. That's what it throws. Indirectly, that's what is happening. Why? When it tries to call average, in average the list is empty and it throws an exception. Right? That's what it does. That's all you need. It's complete. The class is complete. So I think I've almost put comments everywhere. With comments, it has not even taken an hour to put. 1.5 hours, 2 hours maximum. Right? Now to test it, an easy way to test it would be to copy it into BlueJ. If you're not familiar with BlueJ, start using it at least for purposes like this. We are not using BlueJ because, as I said, it's not an industry standard. It's more for educational uses. But it's not so tough to do. So if this class is ready, there are no syntax errors. Right? If you will see syntax errors, you will see red lines. So there are no syntax errors. All you do is you copy it, open up BlueJ. If you have one, if not, I'll show you how to do it quickly. That takes a little time. Create a new class, call it patient. Okay, and your class is ready. Now, of course, the package statement is incorrect. And BlueJ will tell you. It will tell you that it's incorrect. So you can just remove it. I didn't create any package in BlueJ. I just created a class. Right? And the class is now ready. So it's if you compile it from here, though we know there are no compilation errors because we copied it from NetBeans, there are no compilation errors, but I still compiled it. Now, all you have to do is you pick it up, go to your class, and start creating your objects. So it says, okay, how do you create an object? Pass it a name. Here is your object. If you want to get the name of this person, there it is. Right? That's the name. If you want to get how many, what's the weights? I haven't added any weights yet. So if I try to get the patient weights, where was it? Get patient name. Get patient weights. There it is. It will give me an empty list. Now, this simply says it is a reference variable. It's not a value box. Inspect it. You will notice it already tells you the size is 0. So you don't have to go further. But if you inspect it, it says the length is 0. There's nothing to show. Right? So there's nothing to show because the list is empty. I haven't done anything. Now, if the list is empty, now check, are your exceptions working? Try to calculate the average. Gives you an exception. That's how BlueJ will show you. It will give you an exception. So that means that's working. So that job is done. Come back here. And notice it gives you the patient has no recorded weights. It's showing you the message. It's showing you everything. So now let's go and try to find the patient information. It should also give me the same error because average is being called by patient. What else? Now let's try to add a weight. Right? So things are working. I've already tested 4 methods. I've tested get name. I've tested get patients. I've tested one part of average because it's giving an exception. So it's not as if it's working or not working. I don't know yet. And I've tested patient information. Now let's do the others. Add a patient weight. Try to add a weight that is invalid. -1. It should give you an exception. Works. Right? One part done. What is your second part? Greater than 80 is not allowed. Oh, sorry. Greater than 80 is not allowed. Try to give an 81. Not allowed. Now try to give a perfect one. So here is your object. If you're visual, you can see, oh, this is the object I'm talking to about. So I'm talking, how am I talking? I right click and say, can you add a patient weight for me? It says, okay, what's the weight you want to add? Let's add 10 pounds. It gets added. You will say, how do I know? You can always check your get number of visits. How many should there be? 1. I added 1 weight. So it is working. Get number of visits is working. I'll say, oh, let's clear it. You'll say, oh, let's clear it. Okay, let's clear it. Clear it. Okay, let's get number of visits again. 0. That means it was cleared. Right? Now now that everything is done, the only thing that remains is test the calculate thing. I've done add patient weight, I've done clear, I've done all the methods. Let's now add a few weights. So let's add 10, 1 weight added. Let's add another weight, 20 added. I'm just doing it so the math is easy. So that's already 30. 30 divided by 2 is a 15. Let's add another one. Let's add 5. And let's now calculate the average. 20, 35. 35 by 3 is 11.666667. Works. I had given you 2 examples. One where it was less than 0.5, 71 something like that, and one was more than 0.5. So that now when you do patient information, patient Anju has an average weight of 12 pounds. So the 11.6666 became a 12. That means this is also working. Right? Now, the only thing that's not very neat is how do I look at the patient weights? It's not very neat, but it's right here. It will show you a list, inspect it. It says you have 3 in it. Remember, I have 3, I've added 3, inspect it. And then you have to inspect them. This 10 says the maximum that is given to you. Oops, the maximum given to you means 10. When you create an array list, when you just create it, you are given 10 blocks by default to save 10. You need more, it will give you 10 more. You need more, it's a number that is already defined, or 16 more, something like that. But it's default starting. That's not its size. That's how much it is giving you. So the first one should have, we had 10 in it, right? There is 10. That's the first weight I added. The second one, remember it is an array list of objects. So I don't see the values here. I see arrows here. They're reference variables. Then the second weight was 20, sorry, my mistake, 10, 20, and then it was a 5, I think. There it is. All weights are there. Done. Testing done. Finished. 100%. You don't even have to bother. You've done it all right. That's what happens with BlueJ. You can do it very quickly. And it's not tough. It's not tough at all to use BlueJ. Create a class, put your code, create an object, and work with it. And in exams, I will never make it complicated. I won't ask too much of you because I know the time is limited. I know you're thinking. So here, math.round, maybe you hadn't heard of it. What's the big deal? Clear, maybe you hadn't heard of it, but you know add, you know get, you know size. So go and look, there is a clear right there. Right? The other way, so you'll say, oh, I don't like BlueJ, that's your problem. But another way to do would be this. You can create another class in it. We'll call it test patient. Now what happens in test patient is, this is just for, again, very quickly. You do the same things that you just did in your BlueJ, and it will take more time because it's typing, right? So you create your main method because now you're writing an application, public static void main, a string array, call it whatever you like. ARGS is the short form of arguments. Right? So you can test it this way also if you know how to test it. Right now, I know that some of my methods are throwing exceptions. The calculate average is throwing an exception, right? That's one is throwing an exception. Add weight is also throwing an exception because anything less than 1 greater than 80 is creating a problem. And of course, the patient information. So since I know, one thing that you could do is this, which I wouldn't, like for an exam point of view, maybe you want to do it quickly, you could. You'll say, well, I'm not going to handle them. I'm just going to throw it further. So what will happen in that case is this. I'll show you. But if you were writing an actual good application, you wouldn't throw it. You would handle it. So let's create a patient object. How do you create it? Let's create P1. Call the patient constructor. Pass it a name. Right? As soon as I pass it a name, I know it has a name. Print it out. How do you print it out? call the P1, call the get patient name method. And you know what? Do it in steps. Then you can't go wrong. Run it. Test patients. Okay, so maybe run test patient is what I have to do, or maybe do it from here. There is a run here. Run 5. Long. Okay, there it is. So the get method is working. Right? The get method is working. To be on the sure side, oh, I didn't add any weights yet. What is the weight? You call the other get method. If no weights were added, you can get the number of visits. It should be 0. You've just added a patient. The number of visits should be 0. And again, if you want to kind of say, oh, what does it mean? You can start giving normal headings like this. Oh, sorry, it's a plus. That way, when you're seeing output, you know what it means. As I said, this will just take a little more time because you're typing there. 2 methods already tested. It should be. So name is Anju and visits is 0. Methods are working. Right? Now, let's try to do something. Let's try to add a weight. Now, what I was saying is this. If you wanted to call that, what was it called? Something, get patient weights. You'll have to do this. So if you want to call that method, which is returning you the weights, then you'll have to call it this way. Oh, you'll have to, what was it? Alt enter. Okay. So if you want to call that, you'll have to call it with p1.get patient weights. Now, I don't want to make it pretty or anything, like there's nothing, but this is to show you that if a method is returning an array list, you have to save it in an array list. What else, right? Now, a quick way, though, as I said, I'm not going to make it pretty. And I don't have to because it's not a part of my, I'm not expecting you to. So that statement, which was unnecessary, I could have done a system println straight away, but I wanted to show you if a method returns a value, you need to grab it in the same kind of box. So if I try to do this, it's not too untidy at all. Look at it. It will show you an empty array. It will show you an empty array that tells you that there are no weights. And that's not untidy at all. But of course, if I had said, oh, give more information, make it pretty, then maybe one line, then you would have thought about it. But here you won't even. 3 methods already tested. Right now, let's try to add a weight. So let's try to add a weight now. And I'll add all 3 kind of weights. I'll add a negative, I'll add less than 1, greater than 80, and a correct weight. That's what you have to do. Add a weight. Wasn't it add a patient weight? Okay, right? Okay, let's try to add a -1 or even a 0 will give you an error. Doesn't matter. So when you're testing, you have to test each branch of your method. Less than 1, greater than 80, okay value. So add a weight. Now what will happen? Let's see. Let's see what happens. I get an exception, right? Notice what it says. It says an exception was thrown. So I see my name. I see the visits. I see the empty array because till that point of time, I'm okay. At this statement, I get an error. I get an exception. The exception is thrown. I see the message, but it's just a little untidy. It is untidy. That's not what you want to show to your user. You want to show an error message, but not in that way. Not as if like as if there are 10 lines of errors. So what you do is this. So in an actual application, you won't put this is what is happening with this throws. If you don't do it, then of course it will tell you, oh, it's using a method. How can you use this method which is throwing an exception? But if you don't do this, this is what you do. You try to do something. So write a try catch block. So everything you're trying to do, put it in a try catch block. Everything. And then catch it. And for your example, there is only one exception to catch. The exception, nothing else. And what do you want to do in it? You want to just spit out that message. You want to just spit out that message. And that message is e.getMessage. It was getMessage. There it is. There. This is called handling of error, of an exception. This technique is called handling. We've done this before. I've shown you try with many catches. I've also talked about finally and everything. We've done this in the class when I was using my exception. That's all you have to do now. Now when you run it, see the neatness? So it shows me my name, my visits, weight, and then it gives the error message. That means it is working. So it is working with 0. Now you are only testing. Work it with 800, not 800. Let's work it with 90. 90 should also give you an error. 90 also gives you an error. So you know these two are working. Now try to give it with an 80. 80 is allowed. So this weight will be added. You won't have an exception. And it works. Anytime, after every time you add a weight, all you have to do is just kind of print out the weights array again. That's the easiest to do. And I don't want to keep calling it over and over again. I'll call this right here. That was just to show you how you kind of there. If your array is going fine, you're okay. So let's try to run it again. See, so I've gone from 0 to 80. Try a few more weights. I've given you some weights. You had the answer. You didn't even have to do the calculations. Just add those 4 or 5 weights and see if your answer is correct. Take these 2 lines. I could again put it in a method and do it. Oops. But as I'm saying, that's not what I wanted you to do. But this is how you would do it if you want. Control C. Okay, maybe I was pressing something. Try to do a few more, maybe 3. So what did we do in BlueJ? We added a 20. We added a 10. I can't remember now when we added a 5, but doesn't matter. So now if I run it, I should see an array of 20, then 20, 10, and then 20, 10, and 5. It works. Now you have to do the average. Show the average now. So your average works. So you can always do the average before here also. When you get the patient weights, you can get the average. The average will also throw an exception. Try to call the average for an empty list. At this point of time, there are no weights. If I try to show the average weight, you have to check that everything works. If you try to show the average weight with p1.getAverage, or was it average? Just average, or maybe calculate average. Okay, there it was, calculate average. So in an empty list, if I try to throw a calculate average, so here I gave a name, visits were 0. If I try to do this and run it, it will give me an error. And the error will say the patient has no recorded weights. So average is also throwing an exception. It is, right? If you also wanted to check the other one, another method is throwing an exception. Remember the patient information one. Even that one is throwing an exception. So I know it will, so I'm doing it. So let's say information. There is no printing in classes, guys. So many of you did a system out println in the class. I said return a string. So I don't know where you get all that extra information yourself or what is required. This one will also throw an exception. So average one is already throwing it. You can kind of comment it out and say, oh, this should also throw an exception. That will also throw an exception. So we now know. The only thing that is left is the average. Is my average right? So I've tested everything. All I now need to know is test the average. So let's calculate it. There it is. And then also, let's try to show the last one, the patient information. Once something is working and it is throwing an exception, definitely you will have to comment it out. Otherwise, the code will not work. So test, yes, it works. It's throwing an exception. Good. I don't need to, and then do it. There it is. Right. So I created a patient. Then I calculated average, was throwing an exception, showed the information, was throwing an exception. Tried to add invalid weights. So if you want to keep the invalid weights, you can comment them out. So you can do something like this if you want to, but I have to comment it out. Otherwise, my program will not run. So I tried this. I tried with a 0. I got a problem. I tried with a 90. I got a problem. And I should. But don't leave them here because otherwise the program will not run. Once you've satisfied that, yes, it is working, it's throwing exceptions, then comment them out. Now let's see what the answer is. Now this is complete. Name is Anju, visits is 0, started with an empty array, went to 20, then 20 and 10, 20, 10 and 55. Average weight is 11.6667. It gives you 6 places after decimal for a float for your information by default. And then it says patient Anju has an average weight of 12 pounds. Done, finished. Tester is also working. right? Everything is done in less than 1.5 hours. So assuming you do all this, you don't need more than 3 hours. So I always do it first, and I say, okay, if it is taking me this time, I kind of give you double the time for sure, because it's an environment, it's a testing environment. I've seen the question, you're seeing it for the first time. I'm at a leisure, you're not. So I say, okay, everybody has their own, capabilities and time restrictions. It should be good enough. So if you want, I can put the tester too, but that's done now. Finished. Midterm is done 100%. So if you've made mistakes, hopefully this will help you to kind of retrieve it. People who were trying to write testers, in exam time, I can't help you with things that I've already done. If you want to do something on your own, it's your job then, right? So if you want to write a tester, sure, go ahead and write it. I can give you my tester, because then if I give you my tester, you know, oh, the patient information requires no parameters. The average, the get number of doesn't require anything. The add weight requires I'm not giving out this information to you. You have to figure it out yourself. So I can give you my tester, because then you can, if you're intelligent enough, you can put 2 and 2 together and say, this method needs this parameter, this method does not need a parameter, and you can work with it. I don't want to give you the solution. It's like giving you the solution. As I said, if you can put 2 and 2 together, it's giving you out the solution almost. Of course, not the code, but method signatures and everything. So that's how you handle exceptions. That is a very easy way of doing it. So if you remember, you can add as many catches as you like in the right order. Exception comes last because it's the biggest class, the parent of all class. You can have as many catches as you like. You can have a finally if you like. That always happens irrespective of whether exception is thrown or not. And you put everything you want to do inside the try. You put everything you want to do inside the try. Notice here I didn't do a new. Why? Because I assigned it a value. So when you assign a value to an object, it automatically gets created and the value comes into it. Whereas in the other one, I was not assigning it anything. I was adding something to it. So adding means it should already exist. So I didn't do a new here. I created an array list object, but I never said new here because I was not using it any other way rather than assigning it a value. And assigning means it gets created and the value gets saved inside, like the address gets saved inside. Okay, so that's what was expected. Of course, not the tester, but that's what was expected in the class. So I'll put this tester also back on Blackboard for you if you like it, if it helps you, right? And now our next job is, we'll take a break here because then we'll start fresh again. The next job now is, you should definitely know how to write testers like this. There is nothing wrong. Like it's just more job, like it's just using the class. You should know it. According to me, you should. But there's another way of testing the class, which is called automated testing. It's not automatic, kind of really automatic. You still have to code in it, but it helps. It's more helpful. So instead of creating a main method and putting everything on your own and thinking, oh, did I test this or should I forget it? Something, whatever. Automated testing, it's a tool that now comes with IDEs. At least with NetBeans it does. In some other IDEs, if you're using, you may have to add it. It could be a plugin. But we are going to use a testing environment called JUnit, right? So it's a third party. The classes are third party. I think it's org.junit or something from where the classes are imported. But it is an automated way of testing a class that you. So it is a little helpful, but still, you still have to write code in it. You still have to know what you are doing. It's not as if it will create everything on its own and you say, okay, test my class. So that's what we aim to learn today. So it's called JUnit testing. It's called JUnit because you test one method at a time. So I'll write it in its, I'll show you how it is done, but of course it can be done in many other ways, like you collect more than one classes and do it and so on and so forth, right? So we'll take a break here, take a break of 20 minutes and then come back and I'll show you how to write JUnit testing today. Okay, so that's the new aim today. So I'll save this on Blackboard for you. You already had patient, but I'll give it to you again just because I've added more comments to it. That's all. So it's Thursday, right? No, Wednesday. No, Thursday today. And I'll give you the tester also that I wrote, just so that you have it. You know what? I should maybe place it in your weekly learning. Come then. No, we can talk right now. You want to talk outside?
Yeah. No, I didn't think so. Did you take the sentence course? Yeah. So yeah, they have the physical one, the other time they will, you can take it, took class like that week, and then like halfway through. It wasn't so good. No, I was like 8 a.m. But no, I can't get it to work. I talked to the professor, the new guy, Albert or whatever. Yeah, he said the intended version that he said was working, so I thought it was working. No. So between the Facebook one and one, the movie one.
Page that like pulls like database.
Yeah. I don't know if you did do it, but you have to pull a single record through the URL.
I did like almost all the weeks in like a really short amount of time.
Yeah. I saw it when I was I think it was week 10 or 11, but I didn't post for what was Saturday and what was dynamically. But yeah, when you specify a movie in your URL, it's supposed to return like the array with just that movie rather than all the records for the array. No, this is for JSON. Yeah, so you guys did like API like last day. Here's how this works.
So yeah, I have like that gallery page.
No, so if you go into week 12,
Yeah.
the lessons, you'll see. It's week 12, activity 3.
Yeah.
Copy the page into some directory called API, and then you access that directly by going to the URL. Like, well, API. That's the first part of it. So the second part, when you use the same thing, you search query to it. So like another question mark, you type in my math. Right. When you do that, it shows you how it's supposed to display, but it doesn't.
Just find another one that yeah, I have a work.
Sure. For what? Shit's all fucked up. It's just showing an empty array, so like go back to the day, instead of having the data within the array brackets, just square bracket. Try something. Go one over.
Okay.
Yeah. Come on, that. Yeah.
What's your SQL? We got select star.
This is what he sent me. Yeah.
Oh.
Here it is, like.
So I got the, I just had the nested if statement.
That's what it's like. That's the code he used, right?
Yeah.
If. Literally nothing.
Line 18.
Yeah, like that's it's going with the older one, just updated. That's I'm curious if it's changes adding just that little thing. Now I've done literally two things. Oh, fuck. Thanks. No worries.
You find the week 12 jump weird too, or week 11 where you have to separate all the code.
It's fucking brutal.
Yeah, 'cause it's like, oh yeah, after the closing tag, and like the lesson that Rich had written never tells you to like separate the tags. You like write this one solid PHP thing,
Yeah,
echo the table, and then this guy's just like, oh yeah, where your tags are broken.
If someone can get it, try it, pretty good.
At least it's fine.
Send me an email about that, okay? But it's managed to edit it, but you are-
So I've placed this on Blackboard, okay, under your weekly learning, class examples, Thursday. So after I do the unit J testing, I'll place that too, okay?
It's showing error.
Yeah, because bring your mouse over it. What does it say? Incompatible types int cannot be converted to an array list of int. Let's see your add patient weight in your patient class.
Good.
Oh, look at what you've done. Add patient weight only takes one weight. One weight, not the whole array list. So you're adding a weight to the list. So I don't know if that's how you did it. Yeah, so this method, the add patient weight, was adding one value, not a list of values. So I created it with one. My method is, this method takes one value from you, one value. an int value from you and adds it to the list. Your original method is wrong. So if you're writing my tester, it won't work with yours because your method doesn't match mine, right? So my tester will only match my method.
So it's need to int patient.
Int it. That's what the job was, right? What you did was you gave a whole array and then you said, okay, get it. And if it is between this, add it. So it doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's okay. You just thought it a different way, right? So this is on Blackboard if you want to pick it up, okay?
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, guys, so let's start with JUnit testing. People who will come in late can then carry on and do whatever they like because this requires a little bit of environment setting, so do it with me. So what my next step, as I said, is how to write unit testing for Java classes, right? So it's called JUnit testing. Now, NetBeans is helpful. It does allow you to create test classes. So this is what you do to start with. Go to your patient Java, do a right click on it. And if you come down, you will see here under tools, you will see create update tests, right? So go to your patient.java class, right click, go to tools, and then say create or update tests. So this is automated testing, okay? So create or update tests. As soon as you do this, it says, okay, this is what you want to create. I'm going to create a class called patient test. Thankfully, it is different from mine. Mine was called test patient. So this is called patient test. You can change it. You don't have to call it that way, but it's a name that it does. It takes the class name, adds test after it. It says, I'll put it in test packages. So notice how it has created another package called test packages here. Again, you don't have to put it there. You can put it in your own source package. But this also belongs to the same project. It just isn't different. What is the framework I'm using? I'm using the JUnit framework. Okay.
Do you have a version of JUnit you're using?
I think it will use the latest because NetBeans, I just downloaded it before the semester started. So I didn't bother to test.
I'm designing with 4 options.
Oh, okay. You can Google and see. I'm not sure what is the latest unit. So that's why I've gone to NetBeans now, because NetBeans is updated every time anything happens with Java. I've stopped using Eclipse or anything. Then I don't have to bother. Okay. And then you can kind of leave all of these alone. But because I said today, I'll kind of just do it. There are more ways of doing it, but what I'm teaching today will work everywhere. So you can just keep them all where they are. It says, yes, I want to generate comments. I want to do all this and say, okay. So keep in mind that this new class is called patient test and is going under your test packages here. So all it has done is it has now created 2 packages. One is called a source package, just to keep it different, nothing else, right? So your source package has your source files, and your test package is under the same project name, package name patient has a file called patienttest.java. You could have kept it in the same. Now notice a few things. Now it's things to be noticed. So this is automated testing, and it has done quite a few things for us. One, notice the imports it is doing. Everywhere, the Java util, of course, you recognize because we use it. But notice the others, org.junit.after, org.junit. So it is using another package which is not coming from the Java API. But as I said, it's a third-party kind of software. And it is using org.junit test, and it is using org.junit assert statements, right? So this is all automatically done for you. But of course, if you were using it and typing it yourself, you have to remember to import all these packages. So it saves us some time. Now let's kind of go and look at what it has done. So comments in here, I'll kind of, it's not even necessary because it's a test class, but anyway. So it has created a class called patient test. You could have changed the name. I just chose not to because it's a good enough name. It has created an empty constructor. Like any other class, a constructor, when you create an object of this class, the constructor is invoked. I won't be creating objects of this class as per se today, so I can leave this constructor empty. I don't need to. Also now notice that some methods have been added by default, and they have annotations in front of them. The before class annotation says this method will always be executed as soon as you run the class. This is the first method that will be executed when you run the class, right? This method says this method will be executed last when you are running the class. So before it dies down, before execution finishes, this is the method that will be run. So look at the annotations before class and after class. You can change them. They have to be used as per se. The name of the methods you could change, but I never bother to because it doesn't make sense, right? The names are good enough. Set up my class, tear down my class. So again, today, there is nothing I'll do with these methods. There is a method by default called setup. It has a before annotation. This method is automatically run before every method. So any method you want to run, object name dot method name, it will automatically run this before it runs the method. I will run it as a whole complete class today. After, it says this method will be run tear down. This method will be run after any method in the class is executed. So one is for the class, when the class starts execution, when the class finishes execution. The other one is before a method and after a method. So before every method, if you want to run something, this is in setup. For example, just for an example, before you run any method, if you would like to create a patient object, you can do it right here. Right? That's what a setup is. I'll kind of stick to doing everything in the same method today so that you're not kind of thinking so many places. And now start the tests. For every method that you have written in your class, there is a test method. And what does it do? Takes your method name, get patient name, adds test in front of it to make it easy. It also puts a println statement inside it so that it says, this is the method I'm testing. Of course, the rest you have to fill in yourself, but it has given you for every method in your patient class, look at test get patient weights, test get number of visits, test add patient weight, test calculate average, test patient information, test clear weights. Every method that you have written in your class has a corresponding method here to test it. That's what it has done, just a skeleton. You have to fill it yourself. But you may be doing more than one job. Now, one method for average, for example, calculate average, I want to do 2 tests. Is my list empty? Is my average correct? For add patient test, I have to do 3 tests. Below 1, above 80, and a correct weight. So I will have to add more methods, but at least it has created stubs for me. Right? That's what it does. So my job will be, and it hasn't created a tester test, like it has created for every method but the tester. So if you wanted to create something for the tester, we'll create it ourselves. It didn't bother to. I think it says, oh, like if your constructor is not correct, what are you going to do with your class? Right? That's what it assumes. Anyway, so this is going to test the constructor. So now I am doing what I created to mark your exams. Unfortunately, I couldn't use it in more than 3 or 4 submissions because there were mistakes here and there, and I couldn't use it. The tester will only run perfectly if the code has been written perfectly. If you do anything that's amiss, I'll see problems in my tester anyway. So I couldn't use my tester. Only 3-4 students did really, really well, 100%, and I was able to use it. But that's fine. That's okay. You live and learn. So this is going to test the constructor method. It's also a method. So I'll just kind of try to write the same way as they have written. Though I don't have to, but okay. So, and how do I do it? Start with at test, annotation, okay? Now, so you can copy it if you like. I mean, it's not a big deal. These are the signatures. They will be different, so I can write it myself. It's a public, returns nothing. Let's call it test constructor. And there are 2 things to check in the constructor if you know. There are 2 things I've done in the constructor. 1, I've given a patient a name. And 2, I've created an empty array list. If you miss any of these 2, you haven't done what I wanted you to do. Okay, so I'm going to write 2 test methods. 1, test constructor patient name. That's 1. That is 1 I'll be writing. And I'll be writing another one. Because they haven't given it to me, I'll have to kind of create those stubs myself. I'll say test constructor list created or something. You can call it whatever you like. I can't remember what I wrote. Wait list. Test constructor wait list. So did you create the wait list or did you forget to do that? So if you didn't, of course, your program will not run. Now, I just want to tell you something. I've seen a couple of students doing it, and I would like to tell you that that's not how you do it in Java. A couple of students do the new right here. They do the new right here. You go is equal to new right here. That's not how you do it in Java. You don't initialize your variables, your instance variables here. You don't do it. It's just not the norm, right? All initializations are done inside the constructor. That's where they are done. So you don't do them here, and I don't want you to, because just follow the norms in Java. Other languages do it right where they are declared. Java doesn't do it because it says the constructor's job. So do it there. Okay, so there are two things to test, and which one? Patient test. Okay, so that's what the two things I want to test. Lord, how do I test it? Try to write it with me so that it makes sense. I'll kind of copy this just because it's easy. Then I don't even have to think about it. And that's what I mean. It helps so much that you kind of become lazy. Okay, so I'm going to test this method called test constructor. Constructor. So why do I write a system out println statement? You will see when I run the test, it kind of tells me that constructor is being tested. So I know what it is. Create a patient instance. How will you create it? New patient and pass maybe, I think you had Blake, if I remember, or you can do anything, really doesn't matter. This is just testing it. Now, I'm going to do something. I'm going to get the patient name. And what are you expecting back? Anju, oh, with a capital A. Remember, this is case sensitive. Okay, so look at what I've done. A system print statement just tells me what am I testing. It helps the tester to see what is being tested. Then I've created an object of type patient. By default, it is called instance. You can call it whatever you like. JUnit will just put it, it will call it instance just because it's an instance. Then I am going to call the get patient name method. So what am I saying? Call the get patient name method and put the result in a string because it is a string, right? What are you expecting back? EXP stands for expecting back. You can call them whatever you like. I'm just following what JUnit does for me automatically. Why do extra things? What are you expecting back for this patient who was created with this name? Anju. So you say that's what is Anju. And then you are saying, then you are asserting that what comes back must match what I'm expecting. So look at this method called assert equals. The assert equal method is checking two values. Which two values is it checking? It is saying the value that is coming of expected result, which you say that's what you are expecting, should match what is coming from get patient name. If they match, your test will pass. If they fail, something wrong in the constructor. Make sense? So you basically, what do? Create an instance, call a method. This is by expected result. This is what is being returned. Compare the two. If they match, good. Otherwise, the test will fail. So this is one way of doing it. There are many more. There is assert equals. There is assert not equals. There is assert null. There is assert not nulls. So there are some methods, and I'll use as many as I can use today. Okay. So now I've only written one method. The rest is basically not yet done, but I've written one method. And let's see that will this test pass. It should pass. I created a patient with Anju. I'm expecting Anju back when I get the patient name back, right? Now, how do you run it? If you go to your patient test and do, you can also do it from here actually. You can say run and you can say run here, test file. This is the file you're running now. It doesn't have a main. Like it doesn't have a main, but that's how you run a test file. Run it. Click on test file. There is a short form, Control F6. Keep in mind, Control F6. I'll forget myself. See, it says, oh, the test failed. Now let's see what, oh, because there are more in there. Oops, okay. It's not yet complete. So what I'll do is just for now, from here till the end of the class, because it has much more and some of them tests are failing. End of the class is till here, maybe. What do? Control this in there. Comment it out. Control and the slash will comment your code. So now I only have one. I only have one method in my class now. The rest all I commented out. Okay, because those tests are failing because I haven't yet corrected them. So this is the only test method in my test class. So comment out the others. You can select all of them. That's the way I know. Maybe there is something else and do a control and a slash. It will comment it out. Okay, now run this again. So Control F6. Test passed. That means constructor is setting the name correctly. Right? Now, for whatever reason, if you hadn't written your constructor this way, then of course my test will fail. Now I've set it to Anju and I'm expecting, and I misspelled it for whatever reason. My test will fail again. Because I'm setting it to Anju, I am expecting Anju back when I do a get patient. So this is how I'm testing. Did you write the right constructor? That's one way of testing. So if your constructor was not written and it took more than one parameters, my test would fail. Why? Because the constructor doesn't work. So now, therefore, I said my tester was not very useful because many of you didn't write the constructor as I was expecting it. Now, in this case, my test will fail. Why? Because I'm saying set it to Anju, but I'm testing it against AA Anju. So the test failed, and you can see why it failed. Like you can click on it. It said you are expecting Anju, but you got Anju back. So it's telling you where the problem is. Right? So this is just to test it. So if I pass it a wrong parameter, I pass it like this, syntactically it will say you are not using it right. I don't even have to test it. Syntactically it won't be right. So this is testing whether the constructor works properly in the sense of the name you set is what you are getting back. And if this works, I know you wrote your constructor right. One, there is another test to be done. What about the array list? Did you create an empty array list? Now, how will you know, am I testing everything? Now, one way is, oh, did I test this? Did I test this? But there's another way you can do it. And for that, you'll have to download something. If you go to your tools and go to plugins and go to available plugins and type in coverage here, just call it coverage, the English word coverage. You will find, if you have already don't have it, I don't know if you have it from a previous semester. If you already don't have it, if you put coverage here, you must find something called on your left hand side. I've already installed it, so I can't find it. So please go to available plugins and then type in search for coverage. And you should see on your left hand side something called JCO coverage. Did you find it? Install that. Just go, once you find it, this install button will be active, install it. Once you install it, I'll show you how to use it. Okay, so how did I get here? Tools, plugins, available plugins. For me, it is already installed. I'll find it somewhere else. It should be already installed. Why don't I see it? Its name is not coming here. Active, active, active. That's strange. It should show up the JK. Anyway, that's not. So once you have that, then you can do what I'm doing now. So go and install a plugin called JCO coverage. I think it has a name also. I forget what it has before it. Tiki one, right? Something like that. But it's JCO coverage. Okay. You can always go Google it and find it. But right here, you can do it right here. You can do it in Eclipse also by going to Marketplace and maybe searching for it. Okay. Now, the use of this. This is what it is used for. If you go to your test package and right click on the package, oh, sorry, not on the package, sorry, to the Java class and to the patient test Java and right click on, no, not even there, somewhere else. Give me a minute, let me think. Maybe on the main, somewhere else. Yeah, on the main. Please go to the main project name, patient, the name project name, and here say test with JCO coverage. So I'm still testing my test file, but I'm testing it with JCO coverage. In a minute, I'll show you what happens. Say test with JCO coverage. So go to the main folder, to the main project, right click on it and say test with JCO coverage. Click on it. It will test it and also it will create, but also in a minute it will open a window and you see there is so much of red here and there is only a part of green. Let me show you what it is. Click on the patient. Click on now the patient class. The test patient I had written. So don't bother about this test patient. This is the main that I had written. We are interested in this class called patient. See what it says. It says you haven't tested calculate average at all. I haven't yet tested it. You haven't yet tested add patient weight. No, I haven't tested it. So it's kind of telling me that you haven't even tested these methods yet. You have tested your constructor and you've covered it 100%. There are no missed branches. So that's all it is telling me about. You've tested your get patient name because I use the get patient name in my test. So it's telling me, oh, you haven't even tested anything yet. You've only done 7% of your testing. So this will help you to say, oh, did I forget something? So we'll keep coming back to this. And when everything is green, that means you've tested your class completely. Right? So this will help you. Have I missed any tests? Okay, that's where with constructor it's not very good, but with all other methods it's good because it doesn't do the constructor itself. Okay, so this will come up. This should come up for you. So that's the use of JCO coverage. So it's as such, it's not doing anything for you, but it is guiding you to say, what have you tested? What have you left out? What have you tested? What have you left out? So we'll keep coming back to this for the patient class. Okay. Okay. So let's come back to BlueJ again. Oh, sorry, to NetBeans again. Let's write the second one. Now, so remove the comments one by one. We'll remove it. Okay. We'll remove the comments for this one. And now what I want to do in this one is I want to test whether you created a list. I wasn't even looking for anything else, but did you create a list? And to do that, it's a little different. So we'll do the same thing. We'll do a system out println test constructor. You know what? I'll change that a little, because I'm testing two things. So here we'll say constructor. I don't know. What do you want to say? Constructor ID or patient name. So that way I'm testing the patient name here. And here I'm checking your list. Just so that names are different, I know which is being tested. Here. Okay. Now, what I want to test is, did you remember to do a new for your array list? That's what I'm trying to test. So what do I do again? I create a patient, and now look at my test. The test I'm saying is assert not null. I'm asserting that my list should not be null. And how do you get your list? From your instance, get your get patient weights. As I said, it's not that you don't have to do anything. It's just that it helps you to kind of say, oh, you've tested everything. Right? So what will this do? If you forget to do your new statement and you call your get patient weights, it's going to give you an error. I'll show you. First, I'll do this way because I'm right. And then I'll remove that statement of new and you will see that my test will fail. So now I have two tests. So notice I have not used assert equals here. I've used assert not null. So I'm saying my list should not be null. Right? That's what I'm saying. My list should not be null. And you'll say, how do you get your list? I got it by saying get patient weights. That's the method that returns me my array list. So you have to think which method, how do I test it? So it is automated testing, but it is still, you have to know what you're doing. Okay, let's run it again. So you can run every time, you can run with JCO coverage if you want. Is there a short form for it? No? Okay. So I haven't done a lot, but anyway. So again, so you can click on it and you can again click on this and it says you haven't done much. You've tested your patient name method and you have tested your get patient weights, which is okay. I've covered them at least, right? Now, so, and the tests have, both tests have passed. So if both tests pass and I see green here, I know you've written your constructor properly, correctly, as required. Now let me make a mistake. What is the mistake? You needn't do it if you don't want to. The student, and notice what is happening here. Everything that is being tested goes green. Anything that has left out is red. Kind of irritating, but that's okay, right? If you don't like the colors, that's how it does. For example, a student forgets to do this. I'm sure, should there be a way of clearing the test? Reset coverage data. Okay, there. So if you don't like that greens and reds, you can always remove them. Okay. Okay, so what is it saying now? It is saying that, okay, the student forgot to do this. So many of you forgot to do it, but that's okay. But I want to test, right? So I've kind of commented this out. So a student forgot to do this. So what do? I go back to my test again, to my run again, Control F6, and I run it again. Control F6. And you see one of my tests failed. Look up which one failed. And here is what is the printlns are coming here. So it went to constructor patient name. The first method ran. I was running the second method and I got an error. And it says, look at the error. Now, of course, you have to know how to read the errors, but you know a test failed. It says failed JUnit framework, the error. It says the error occurred on patient test at line number 56. Something happened here. It didn't work. So this tells me the student forgot to do something. So that's how it will help me to find out whether you wrote your methods correctly or not. Okay. So I say, oh, something is wrong. I go to the constructor. If I see, so the aim is if everybody is doing perfect, it's only taking me 5 minutes to check an assignment or an exam. But of course, if errors are being made or things are not right, then I have to go back to your code to see what did you miss, what happened, what didn't happen, and so on. So 4 or 5 students, I could do it, but the rest 50, 55, I had to do it myself, which is fine. That's no big deal. So my second test is now ready. Now let's go to the third one. The third one I've actually automatically done, but they created it for me because the J unit created it for me because it thought, oh, like we have to test it, right? So you can again remove the comments one by one, but this test is already done. It's done in my constructor. So what are you doing? Again, you do the same thing. So this is something I could have done in setup. The creating of the instance I could have done in setup because I am doing it every time, right? So let's create Blake. And what is your expected result? Blake. What are you calling the get patient name? Please remember to remove this fail. Because that's why our tests were failing. They have a default fail statement there. So you can make a test to fail yourself if you like. You can say fail, the test case is a prototype. So there is the fail method, which we don't want to do, but anyway. So that's why our tests were failing. Okay, so this is not very difficult to understand at all. I created a Blake patient and I said I'm expecting Blake back. So EXP stands for expected result, and the result is a variable that you're using to call the method. And you're putting your result there. And it is smart enough to put it in a string. It's smart enough to put it in a string because it knows that what you're expecting back is a string. Okay, and then assert equals. So one by one, we'll kind of go through. What will you do with get patient waits method? Let's see. So now you remove this one. Now this one is not a very easy one to write because it's an array is coming back. So there are a few ways you could do it. The easy way is once you create some weights, get the size of the array list and say it works. That's how you can kind of use it, right? But otherwise, the get patient, and see, it's smart enough. Notice what is its expected result? It is an array list of integers. Why? Because your get patient result is returning an array list of integers. So it kind of helps you. So it's creating an instance variable. It is creating what you're expecting back. It is saying what you should get back when you call it. And then, of course, you have to do something with this. This is a little tough to write on your own, but I mean, there is an easy way to get out of it. So remove this. So now if I create a patient, I add some weights to the patient and something is getting back. This is more work for sure. Because in this array list, it is returning an array list and I have to match two array lists. I can do it. It's not impossible. It's just a little more work. So instead of null here, what is that method which converts a list into an array list? Give me 1 minute. I have to look it up. Let's see. I'm trying to look for a method. There is a method. I can't remember to which class it belongs. Add all, add clear, contains all, equals. Okay, let's try this one. Compares the specified object with this list for equality. Maybe this will work. There's an equals method which says returns true if and only if the specified object is also a list, both lists have the same size, and all corresponding pairs of elements in the two sizes are equal. But before that, I have to, okay, so there is an equals method, but that's not what will be handy. I have to convert a list. I remember there is something to list. I just can't remember where it belongs. To array, there it is. Returns an array containing all the elements in the proper sequence. Let's try this one. To array. Let's try this one. It returns a list of objects. Oh, okay. Oh, returns an array. So that's not what we need. Returns an array. That's not what we need. I can't remember that now. Is it to list? Converting array list in Java collection. Okay. This could be a little tough for you, but I'll look for an easy one. This it's using lambdas and stream classes. See if there is a toList method, toList T. Or I could be wrong. I just think it's toList and toCollection, toCurrent map, toConcurrent map, toConcurrent, toList. Returns a collector that accumulates the input elements into a new list. Okay. Returns a T collector that accumulates the input elements into a new list. I could try that. I could be wrong, but I think. Okay, I can try it. Okay, there is a method called toList of the collector class. Is it a static method? Yes, it is a static method. It belongs to which class? Collectors. Okay, let's try. Otherwise, I'll do it in an easy way. Okay. Okay, so let's create a patient. Let's create a patient. What I'm expecting back, let's add a few weights to the person. So instance dot add control space bar. Okay, so add a few weights. Let's add a 10 and a 20. Oh, what does it? Oh, it throws an exception. Does it throw any? That's what it is saying. Yeah. So just add throws exception here. It's just a method, okay? So I'm adding a weight 10 and I'm adding another weight 20. Or even 10 doesn't matter. Maybe the next time he came, he was still 10 pounds. What am I expecting back? Okay, I'm using that toList for a minute. I could be wrong, okay? Can I say 10, 12? Alt, enter. Oh, no, it doesn't like it. Method toList cannot be applied to given types. No arguments are required. Found intent. Okay, it doesn't like it. Okay, you know what? I'll do it some other way. I'll have to work on this for sure. I'll work sometime else, but anyway, I'll do it in an easy way. I'll comment this out for now, and I'll work on it outside class. I thought I could do it. It didn't seem too tough. Anyway, so comment those two out, but I can do this for sure. What can I do? I added 2 weights, right? So the easy way would be if I've added 2 weights to my object, the size of my list should be 2. Right? I've added 2 weights and the size should be 2. So what will I do? I'll take an int. I'll say my expected result is what? Your expected result is 2. And what is your result? Patient, so instance, get the size. Remember that get number of visits? And if they're equal, that means both weights got added. Right? Both weights got added. This is an easier way of checking whether the weights were added. I was trying to return the whole list and check it, but this will work, but it's not the right way. The right way would be to get the whole list because it's returning an array list and then compare the 2 lists. But I'm unable to kind of it will take some time. So instead of doing it now, I am doing it the easy way. So if I create a patient Blake and I add 2 weights to that patient, then the size, the number of visits should return a 2. And if it does, that means it got added. My array list got created. Right? So it's not the correct one, not the perfect one, but it will work. It's not the perfect one, but I'll make it perfect. So the get patient weights is not actually returning an integer. It returns an array list. And my aim should be to compare this array list with what I get back. And that is where I'm kind of stumbling as to what should I use. How do I check if the 10, 12 is what comes back? So this array list that I have to create, I don't know.
Why just build an array list function?
Sorry?
Why just build a new array list function and add utilities to it yourself?
So you mean I just create a new array list here and put it, and yeah, that could be done. That's another way of doing it. Yeah, you're right. Why not? Let's try that. So let's create an array list, right? And let's create an array list of type integer. Yeah, that is a better easy way out. And then let's create, what do I want to create? Weights. Just let's call it weights for now. I'm trying to see if I can do it. Yeah, at least that's better than using the size. And to weights. Why didn't I simply call it expected result, right? Let's call it expected result. I mean, I won't change the name just because it makes more sense. So I'll go expected results. Bear with me, please. Okay. It's not as if you won't understand it. I'm just doing it. Add 10 to it and add 12 to it. I'm creating an array list which has 10 and 12 in it. And then I'm adding my own weights. So this is something that I created. In the sense, this is as I said, this is an easy way out. There should be something else which is much quicker without reinventing the wheel. In the sense, I created one and I added 2 weights. And this is what I've added to the instance. And now what are you expecting? Now what are you expecting? You're expecting that the expected result, which is an array list, should be equal to the result array list. Make sense? A little more work, as I said, kind of getting something around, but it should work. So I'll kind of maybe remove empty lines so you can see more than one. I wanted to keep those empty lines so that you could see it, but anyway, here. This is what I've done in the method. So I said get patient weights. Then I kind of created a Blake patient. I added, and this is for me. This is me creating what I'm expecting back, which is not incorrect. I was just trying to see one method that could do it. Here I have to do it in 3 lines. I create a new array list. Oh, what isn't it like? It's not being used is what it is saying. Redundant type. Oh, it says you don't need the, that's strange. I'm using the diamond operator. Maybe it doesn't need the type anymore. I don't know. Maybe in Java 8. That's why it's giving me a kind of warning. Alt enter shows hints. Okay. Alt enter shows hints. Use diamond inference. Now, what does that mean? Use diamond. Let's try. What does it do? Oh, it doesn't need the integer at all. It's what it is saying. It doesn't like it anymore. So something has changed in Java 8 that I'm not aware of. So I always put my type here. It says you don't need it. It says you don't even need it. I'll infer it myself. If you are adding 10 and 12 to it, I'll assume it is an integer list. Okay, that's neat to know, but I'll read more about it before I remove it. Okay, so what did I do? I created a list on my own, added 10 and 12 to it. Then I added the weights to the instance. So Blake now has a weight of 10 and another weight of 12. Then I said, get the weights using the get patient weights method. And then I say these 2 lists should be equal. Let's see if it works. I'm not so sure because I'm using the array list for the first time. I think I used size when I went with your exam. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's save this and do a control F6, sorry. Oh no, something failed. Null pointer exception. At 82 and 62. At 62 in, oh, did I forget to remove my comments? Oh, sorry, here. The problem is here. I forgot to remove these comments in my patient.java. When I was showing you that I'm creating an error, I forgot to remove it. So that's a null pointer exception, makes sense. Okay, so let's try again now. Sorry about that. Remember, I had commented it out to show you that the constructor won't work. And now, of course, I don't want that to happen. Okay, let's try again. Okay, so all 4 tests have passed. So my array list is working. My get method is working. So when you get it and when you compare it, it is working. So you kind of go one by one. Some are difficult to write, some are much easier to write. But that's what did I do? So think again, what did I do? I'm testing my get patient weights method. What is the get patient weights method returning? An array list. And I want to say, yes, it returned an array list. So I created my own array list. So I created an array list. I called it expected result just to keep with the norm. They're calling it expected result and result. I created an array list. I added 10 and 12 in it. Then I added, now you can leave blanks because it's not, I just want to show a differentiation. You can add your own comments. So you're creating your own array list with 10 and 12. Then you are adding the weights to the patient. And then you're saying, get that patient weights, get it. And then you're saying what I created because it is 10 and 12 and what you got back should be the same. And it works. So that means my method is working. It is returning an array list with 10 and 12. That's my expected result. Good, that was good, Brian. Thanks. Much easier than looking up. So it does work, right? So as I said, I could do better. Instead of 3 lines, maybe I need 1 line, but logically there is nothing wrong in it at all, right? Logically, there is nothing wrong. It's much better than getting the size. So that method also works. Let's go to the next method now. So one by one, I'm kind of work here. It is, this is where you could do your get number of visits. So let's do this, comment, uncommented. And that's your job. One by one, start writing your methods. Now, what do you want to do with your, oh, where did it go? Control Z. Oh, I did something else. I removed it. Okay, here. Now, how do you test your get number of visits method? There is 2 testing you should do. One, if there are no visits, you must get back an answer of 0, right? And if there are visits, you must get the right one. So you can write 2 methods. You can write 2 testers for it. One, when there is nothing, you are expecting a result of 0 back, which you've actually also done in your constructor, I think, right? And 2, when you have added some visits. Okay, so what will I do? I'll make a copy of it. This is get number of visits and I'll add 0 to it. Just because I don't am. This is the one which is testing, oh, you don't have any visits. I've just changed the name and I'll call it get number of visits 0. I'm expecting a 0 back. So I create an instance. How do you create it? You go new patient and call it whatever. Really doesn't matter. I'm stuck with Blake because it was in your exam. What are you expecting? 0. And if they're equal, you're good to go. Oops. There. Does that method make sense? What are you doing? You're creating an instance. You didn't add any weights. So when you say get number of visits, what must you get back? A 0. If this test pass, that means the method works properly. So let's run this test. Do a function F6. Oh, not function. How silly. Control F6. And all tests have passed. Now, copy and paste. But instead of 0, we'll test another method. You can't call it the same. Let's say non-zero. Let's say something else. Let's say get number of visits. It's not a 0 now. So how will you test if it works? You will have to add some weights. And how do you add weights? So let's say, let me add only 2 because it's easy. How do you add weights? You go instance. We've already done this actually. So let's copy. I've already added 2 weights here. You could add 5. You could add 10. Nobody stops you. So you add 2 weights, and since it is throwing an exception, add throws exception here. See, everything that you've learned, you have to use it, still use it. So I was adding and I didn't have a throws exception here. It came up with a error for me saying, you can't use this method. It is throwing an exception. So what did I do? I created Blake, and for Blake, I added 2 weights for Blake. I said the expected result is 2 and it should match. If the result is okay, if the test passes, that means get number of visits is working properly. Okay, so now again run it. Do a control F6 and all tests must again pass. All 6 tests have passed. Okay, so let's go forward. I'll give you a tough one now. Not a tough one. I just want, oh, okay. Let's do this one now. Now with the get patient weight, keep in mind that there are 3 things to be tested with get patient weight. 1 below 1. So start naming them. 1 is below 1. 1 will be above 80 and 1 will be correct. So I have to do it thrice. So before you copy it, remove this. You know, you will know it. I'll show you how you will know. So let's add this. So below 1, try to add a patient weight integer here. Create a new person. You can use your own names. the patient weight is, what are you expecting? It's an integer. I won't even need it. I'll try to add a 0 here. So if you wanted to use an integer, you could make this as a 0. Maybe that's better. Let's do that so that I'm not even using hard-coded data here. Okay. What are you expecting? This method is trying to add a below 1 weight, right? Below 1, and your valid range is 1 to 80. What are you expecting? It should throw an exception. So there are two ways to work with it. I'll show you what are the two ways. This method should fail. Why? Because it will throw an exception. So this is the first time you're seeing that a method should fail. Why should this method fail? Because you're trying to add 0 and you can't do it. You can't add 0 because 0 is invalid. So this test should fail, not pass. So passing all tests doesn't mean, oh, everything is okay. And failing doesn't mean something is wrong. Failing could be expected. So let's try to run it. And then I'll show you, if you don't like the red, you all want to see all green, there is another way of doing it. Do a control F6 again to run it. And one of your tests will fail. Look at which test failed. This is the test that failed and which is okay. What does it say? The weight must be an integer value between 1 and 100. So it was expected to fail. It has failed, so it is working. But as I said, let me show you if you don't like, I have written it somewhere, I forget. Oh, there it is. Okay. Now I can do it this way. You'll say, oh, it should not fail. It should fail. But if you want to do it another way, this is how you can do it. You can say that I am expecting this method to throw an exception object. So this is another way of doing it. Now this test will pass. Why? Because you're saying, I'm expecting that an exception object will be thrown when I try to do this. And the test will pass because you've said I'm expecting it. So you can write it either way. You can do it this way and it will all pass. You can do a control F6 and all tests will all pass. This is one way of doing it. The other way is that you don't put this and you know that the test will fail, which is also okay. So do whatever you like. Whatever makes sense to you, do it. But the only thing is you open it up. Oh, which one has failed, and see that the right one has failed. This one should fail. Okay. So now you'll say, am I done? Did I do my add patient weight? How will I know where have I tested it? Let's try to run it with JCO coverage. And I'll show you what I want you to show you. Test it with JCO coverage. The test will still fail. That's okay. But I want to show you what comes up here. Now again, click on this. Click on your patient and see what it is saying about your add patient weight. It says you have tested it, but you still have some missed branches. Why? What branches are missing? I haven't tested above 80 and I haven't tested a correct one. So again, JCO coverage is helping you to say you haven't tested it completely. So don't go by this green. Here it says, okay, you've tested it, but go by missed branches. So it is saying that you have only covered 75%. You haven't covered everything yet. So what should I do? Go back to your blue NetBeans again, copy this, make a copy, and let's test the second branch. What is your second branch? Your second branch is, of course, why do you see this red squiggly? Two methods cannot have the same name. That's why you see this red squiggly. Two methods can only have the same name if their parameters are different. The parameter list is different, which is called overloading. But you can't have two methods with the same name. What are you testing here? Let's test 90. Are you expecting it to fail again? Yes. This is my second branch. What is your third branch? The valid value. Okay, so let's make another copy. And we'll call it, I don't know why that comes up. So let's say valid. Or you can say between 1 and 80. You can call it anything. You can call it 180, something like that. Or you can call it valid. This is a valid one. And what should you do? Give any valid value. 10. 10 is a valid value. And of course, you are expecting it to pass. You're expecting this one to pass. You should be able to add 10. Right? You should be able to add 10. So 2 tests will fail and this will pass because it is a valid value. So now run it again. Do a control F6 again. 2 tests should fail. 7 have passed, 2 have failed. What are the 2 tests that have failed? Look at it. The 2 tests that have failed is one for your 0 and one for your 90. Make sense? They should fail. And another, to make this fail, to make this test fail, if you remove this, you're saying, oh, I'm expecting it to throw an exception. It cannot throw an exception. This will fail again. So if I try it now and if I do a control F6, control F6, I'll have 3 tests are failing. Only one? What happened to the... why is it saying one? Oh, 2 tests caused an error. Okay, so 3 are failing in the sense. So this one is saying there is a warning here. It's saying, I'm not expecting you to get an exception here. How are you getting an exception here? I removed that backslashes from here. I'm not expecting an exception here. It says, how are you expecting? 10 is a valid weight and you're saying you are expecting an exception? Don't do that. So I would even not write it. I mean, why make mess of it? So this one, don't remove it. It's not the right way of, oops, it's not the right way of doing it anyway. There. So see, I'll kind of repeat for you. I added a below 1 and I'm saying this test should fail and it failed. It threw an exception. If you don't like to see reds, you remove this and it will pass because you're expecting. So you think of, know how you're doing it. Second one, I said above 80 should fail again. It failed, right? And in this one, of course, it should pass and it does pass. So now, it doesn't say fail, it says caused an error. Why is it causing an error? Because I gave it an error message. I threw an exception. Okay, so I've also tested add patient weight. So now let's go to the next one. Calculate average method. So you just go one by one, you keep going and filling in those lines. Oops, and remove this. Anyway, we have to remove it. Okay, so now this is my next one, test calculate average. Now with test calculate average, now if you try to run it with JCO coverage, the one that we've just completed, I'll do it for you if you don't want to kind of do it, which is okay. All branches should show covered for that method. See, all branches have been covered for add patient weight. So now I know that I have tested my add patient weight completely. Notice how it says all branches are done. So there were 3 cases, less than 0, greater than 80, sorry, less than 1, greater than 80, and a correct one. All branches have been tested. So JCO coverage helps you in that way. Have you covered everything? It's not a testing tool, like it's not a tool that is doing testing, but it is a tool that is helping you to take care that you've tested everything. So it's a helpful tool. Okay, now let's come here again back. Now think about calculate average. Calculate average again has kind of 2 cases. 1, if the list is empty, you can't have an average. And 2, if there is something in the list. So again have 2 cases. So let's go calculate average and put empty with it. This list is empty. Create your instance. So you can put empty here also. Just because it comes up, then you know where you are stuck or which didn't run properly, what test didn't run properly. It kind of shows you the system out printlns on the right hand side if you have paid attention. Let's create Blake again. And this is something I could have done in my setup. I'm doing it in every method. This can go in your setup. Okay. Now, what am I expecting? I'm not even expecting anything because it should throw an exception. This should throw an exception. So if my list is empty, I mean, you can, I don't even need to do this. You know what? I'll make a copy first because I need it in the other one. I'll make a copy first and then I'll remove it from here. We'll call it, this is not the empty one. Okay, now that I have a copy, if I try to call the calculate average method, I don't need this. If I try to call the average method, I should get an exception because my list is empty. I didn't add any weight. So this test must fail because it will throw an exception. Make sense? So the list is empty. I'm trying to calculate average and my list is empty. Why is it empty? I didn't add any weight. All I did was create a patient. Did I add any weights? No. So this should throw an exception. Now, just because this is not yet complete, though I made a copy of it, it's not yet complete. Till here, now I have 3 error conditions that must come up. 3 caused errors. So this is the system out printlns that I'm writing so that I know, okay, add patient weight is tested, add so on, right? Okay. So here it is saying weight must be between 1 and 80. Weight must be an integer value between 1 and 80, and the patient has no recorded weights. So the average is working with empty list. Okay. Now do the other one. So all you have to do is one by one go through the whole thing. But this is still called automated for your, oops, this is still called automated for your information. Because at least you know that you are doing it one by one. So now in this one, we'll add some weights to Blake and we'll kind of go ahead and do it. And I want to show you something here, which is a little different. Notice how assert equals has 3 parameters. It has 3 parameters. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to just open the exam that I wrote for you. I'll pick up. Oops, no, you're not here. So where are you? What did you have from me? You had a document, right? There it is. So section 2. I'm just opening this because I had given you some weights here and I don't want to do the calculations again. So 8, 15, 22, 27, and 80. This is what I gave for Blake. I'll do a control C here. And I'll go back to NetBeans and I'll kind of put it here. Then I know what I have to add. Okay, so this is what I have to add for Blake. So please go instance dot add patient weight and put the value 8 inside it. That's your first one. Right? And then copy and put 15, 22, 7, and 18. I know the answer of it. That's why I'm doing this. Okay, so 8 is the first one. 15 is the second one. 22 is the third one. 27 is the next one. And 80 is the third one. Last one. Now you can comment this out or remove it. So you've added some weights. What was that? Shift Alt and F. There it is. Okay. So I've added some weights. What are you expecting the result to be? 30.4. 30.4. So your expected result is 30.4. Then you call the calculate average method and then you compare it. Let me tell you what is this third parameter. What is this 0? Now, remember, real numbers are never accurate. Integers are. Integer 1 means a 1. But if you say, oh, the answer can be 26.2893, like it's a big, like, and there are thousands of floating point numbers between any 2 integers. Between 1 and 2 itself, there are millions and trillions of floating point numbers. So this is kind of giving you the error range. You are saying, okay, compare the 2 values, but if they are different by 0.02, don't bother about it. So this is your error range. I took an example in which it will be exact 30.4, no more, no less. So I'm saying it should be exactly, there should be no error range at all. But you can give, this is called a delta. It's called delta. You're kind of giving it a range. Okay, it's okay if you get a 30.42. It's okay if you get a 30.38. You're giving a range of 0.2. That's where this third parameter is used for a delta range. I don't want to use it because I exactly know that the answer is 30. I picked up an example in which it should be a 30.4. Now when you run this again, and you can do one more test. I gave you 2 examples. I gave you one with 5 weights and I think I gave you another with 4 weights. In one, it was 30.4. In another, it was 28.7, whatever it was. So you can now run it again. And again, the only 3 that are causing errors are, we know what are the 3 ones. Now you can do something else here. You can do a system.out_println, and because you know it is the right one, you can call your, I'll tell you why am I calling it here. Now keep in mind that the get patient information is returning a string, and it is very difficult to compare 2 strings. You could be giving a message, name of the patient, average weight. I am expecting the name of the patient is, and so the messages could be different. So I can't write a test method to compare a text message that you're returning and something I'm expecting. So what I can do here is I can do a print here and I know whether your printing is working properly. You see, so methods that return an integer or a float or something else is all okay to test. They're so easy to test. But a method that returns a string is kind of difficult to test because there could be difference of spellings of anything. Like it's a text. So I'm comparing two. It's like comparing two lines of text, and it could be different. So this way, if I see an answer of 30, I know that your patient information is also working correctly, right? Because 30.4 should round to what? 30. And if it is something more than, so you can create another one. So let's say test calculate. How many weights are these? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's take a 30, calculate average 5 and copy and paste again, please. Control C, Control V. So, and I'll do this with the other girl. I gave you 2 of them, one with 4, one with 3rd. So, change this also. This is average 4 with 4 weights, and change it here also. This was average 5. Okay, what am I going to do in 4 is I'm going to take a patient instead of Blake. I think it was Chloe. You have to be patient. Your tester is a job you could do in Java. Testers are professional testers, right? So you could be writing applications or you could be testing applications. And testing is a job in itself. You could be applying for being a tester, but you still have to know Java, of course, right? Okay, so now with Chloe, go back to, I'm going back, you don't have to. She had 7, 10, 25, and 49. Control C. She's a fat kid, 22.75. Okay, let's come back here. I'm going to put it here. And 7 is the first one. 10 is the second one. 25 is this just had a different answer. Rounding, I'm checking my rounding also, keep in mind. And this was 49. And I am expecting to get an answer back of 22.75. So I had given you this so that if you wanted to do it, you could do. You really didn't have to put much brains if you wanted to write a tester and quickly test it. Not this one, of course, with Bluely or something. Okay, and now, so this one will show, wouldn't it like, oh, this one. Remove this now. Okay, so Chloe, this one I called average 4 because there are 4 weights, and the other one I called average 5 because there were 5 weights. Why did I repeat it? This one when rounded will give a 30, and this one when rounded will give a 23. So this is also checking if your patient information has been written correctly because you're doing a rounding there, right? Try again now. Do a Control F6 again. And look for your system out printlns also. Patient Blake has an average weight of 30 pounds. Oh, where did average 4 go? That's strange. Average 4. Did I have problems in average 4? No. Why didn't it run? Calculate average 5. Average 4 is missing. Let's try it again. Why is it missing? Oh, you know why it's missing? I forgot the @test annotation. It's not a test method. So if it's not a test method, it doesn't test it. Okay, you have to have that @test annotation. Okay, let's try again. So notice now, Chloe has 23, which I was expecting. 22.75 goes to 23. And it was a 30.4, so it goes to 30. Patient information has also been tested. We've tested those methods also, right? Now let's go and see what else remains. Oh, clear weights. Okay, let's do clear weights now. I think this will be the last one because we've already tested the. So remove the last 2. And you know what I'll do? Because we've done this before, I'll kind of take this patient Chloe again, add a few weights to her record, and then I'll clear them. Okay. I've added throws exception. Anytime you use a method that is throwing an exception, you will need to. And that's why I made you throw those exceptions. And now clear them. After you clear weights, what are you expecting back? You're expecting back that the number of visits should be equal to 0. So what are you, or you can write your patient information and it should come back with saying it has no records. You can do whatever you like now. Once you clear, you can't find the average. So you can call the average if you want. Once it is clear, you can't call the patient information because it throws an exception. So you can use whatever you like. Number of visits equal to 0 is something I'm using. So I'm taking an integer. Oops, I'm taking an integer. I'm saying that the number of visits for this patient, expected result, no, expected result is equal to 0. I'm keeping with the same format, okay? Take result with this patient called instance, call get number of visits, and I'm saying assert equals that it should be equal to 0. Make sense? Clearing, you could check your clear methods in a number of ways. This is the easiest one to do. Once I clear it, the size should be 0. The number of visits should be 0. You could have done it with average, it will throw an exception. You could have done it with get patient information, it will also throw an exception because you're trying to show average weight of somebody who you have cleared. This is the easiest, so I'll use this and let's run it again. And we'll also run it with, once I'm done, I'll also run it with so 3 tests, the 3 tests being failed are okay. Keep in mind the 3 tests that are failing are okay. So clear also done. We don't have to do this. We've already done this. Like this is very difficult to do. Anything that returns a string is very difficult to do. Anyway, so you can, if you like, remove it or you can leave it as per se. Now I'm going to go to patient, do a right click. I'm going to say test with JCO coverage. Selecting all greens. I've tested it completely. All branches, everything. Okay, so let's go to patient. So test patient, I'm not even testing. That's why it's showing red. See, I've tested everything. So once you see everything is green here, that means you've tested your class completely. So if the patient class, so it actually goes the other way for your information. Testers are written first and then the classes are built on the testers. Why? Because the tester is saying, this is what I am expecting from you. So you can get a tester and I can say, here is a tester, write a class that will work for this class. Opposite, it also works opposite. It's not that you write a class and then test it. Test classes can be written first and then you are asked to write a class that will pass all the tests in that particular tester. Both ways, it can be done both ways. So I've tested all my methods now. My JCO coverage is complete. That means my testing is complete. Now the variations are, there's no difference of writing the tests. It's written like this, how I've written them using those methods, assert nulls, assert not nulls, or whatever. The variations are, which I haven't tested on NetBeans now, to be truthful on NetBeans yet, but the variations are that you could create a suite of tests and run them all together. Once you know that everything is, here I went step by step. So writing is not different. You're still going to code this way. You're still writing methods. How you run them could be different. You could run, there's an @run which you can run all suites together. I think it's called run all suites or something. I forget. So it can be done in various ways. Instead of one test at a time, you can run all of them. You can run more than one test classes at a time. But how you do unit testing is done this way. So the concept is this. The variations are not in writing it. The variations are just running more than one test classes or running only a test and so on. There is where your tear down and setup will be more helpful. Okay, that completes what I wanted to do today with JUnit testing. So that's another thing under your belt now, right? How to do JUnit testing in Java. And it's a big thing. Believe me, it's a big thing. So you could choose whatever you like. You could be doing testing like this, or you could be doing testing like, oh, okay, you could be doing testing like this. It's fine. They're both okay. There's nothing wrong in writing the whole code yourself in a main method. The only difference is one is said to be automated testing, and it's a tool which is available, and it is expected that you should know how to do it. To me, this is more also teaching you how do you create the objects, how do you call the methods, and so on. And that's another way of doing it. But you see, all that knowledge you've done here, you've also kind of used it in JUnit. You know how to create an instance. You should know how to call a method. But there, instead of kind of printing out and saying, oh, are my answers right or not, you're using methods like assert equals, assert not null. There is assert true, assert false. If you kind of go and Google it and look at assert methods, you'll find that there is a list, right? So there is a whole programming with assertions here. So you can kind of go here and look for more. And it's not a very long list. It's not very long. It's assert equal, assert not equals, assert not null, assert null, and things like that. And of course, there's always online help. Like for null, I had to go and see how do I see if an exception is being thrown or is being expected. Okay, so that's for today. So your next assignment would be now to create a test class for a class that I gave you, because that's what you've learned new, which of course we can do today, but we will. I'm marking your, what has remained? The game, right? I'm marking your game. It will take some time. Please be patient. I'm marking something else from another section that I teach. I kind of left them alone because I was marking the exams, because exams had more worth marks. They were 20 and 30%. So I wanted to give those exams back so that if you had to drop the course or whatever, you had a good idea of where do I stand. The game will only be 10% kind of. So that's less than Java test, which was 20%. So I marked the test first, and I did same for your relational database also. So please bear with me. You're not going to get back the game for another couple of weeks. I've almost seen all games. So you have a good idea. You have my feedback. I've told you, oh, this is too simple, or you didn't do this, or this doesn't run, or stuff like that. So you have a good idea. It could be anything from a 0. If the game is not running, it could be a 0. But I still want to see the code to see how well you've written it or how poorly you have written it. Because if the game doesn't run, it's a 0 there, but maybe your code was good, well written. You missed something, and therefore you're having a problem. So I have to still do that. Right, so please bear with me. I'm telling you, it won't come back before 2 weeks, because the one I'm marking right now will take a week, and then I'll start marking the game.